Today, we're turning this into this, as Middle-earth goes grimdark and Minas Tirith is about to get stacked full of Space Marines, like a lot of Space Marines viciously murdering each other. Welcome to the Siege of Gondor. I mean the Mark of Calth Horus Heresy campaign. Last Saturday, we unveiled the first episode of our absolutely insane new Horus Heresy narrative campaign, The Mark of Calth, and it is the beginning of the most insane Warhammer content you've ever seen, featuring over 50,000 points of models and a whole raft of stupidly massive scenery. The campaign follows the story of possibly the greatest Warhammer novel ever written, Know No Fear by Dan Abnett, and takes place on the Ultramar planet of Calth, where the Loyalist forces are viciously betrayed, and it's absolutely going to knock your socks off. The first episode is linked down in the description and the pinned comment and features an absolute banger siege with the forces of the Dark Lord Sauron, Warmaster Horus, assaulting Minas Tirith, Leptius Numinous, the Governor's Palace on Calth. Now, over the last 2 years, you guys have seen the absolute monster Minas Tirith community build start to come together, culminating in the beginnings of the biggest wargaming board of all time. And you know what Minas Tirith really looks a hell of a lot like? Rome. And you know who are basically Romans in space with fucking huge spaceships and fucking huge guns and fucking huge Roman-style fortresses? The fucking Ultramarines. So today we're going to be converting the epic Minas Tirith Siege of Gondor board and turning it grimdark as Minas Tirith becomes Leptius Numinous, the Governor's Palace on Calth.
Officer of Record, start the mark.
Now, the first part of this build is going to focus on converting the original Minas Tirith layout into a new setup that better suits Leptius Numinous as described by Dan Abnett, and will dramatically change how the board plays and also make it perfect to represent a whole raft of other Gondorian fortresses in Middle-earth like Dol Amroth and Caer Andros. Our first task is to take two halves of the Tubatown board, brought to life by the Fellowship of the Zorp collab with some amazing YouTubers, and change the orientation of the inner and outer ring walls to make one 8-foot-long outer wall. Our first challenge is that when these two boards are laid together so the walls align, the front edges aren't in sync, but that works perfectly, as one of Leptius Numinous's most prominent features is a drainage culvert that is spanned by a causeway leading up to the front gate. So one of the real challenges of making massive boards in a ridiculously small space is that I have to do this occasionally when I can't get access to a living room or the garage. I've laid these two sheets out on the floor of my studio with every bit of box jammed and shoved out of the way, and what we're looking at now is we're looking at this space here, the front portion. This is where our channel is going to be. There's going to be a bridge that comes out for the center. This little piece down here will go down to a dock, and we're going to start working on the fascia, the rock face, and getting that channel all coming together. I actually began this build on a live stream where we cut down a baseboard to perfectly fill that gap and began to mock up the causeway. The structure of the bridge was made with XPS foam, and I decided to keep it running in line with the main road on an angle over the culvert, which made for a few tricky cuts, but ended up with a really interesting structure, and it would also allow it to meet a section of paved road on the next board, which you'll see in a little bit. After the live stream, I dived into carving some brickwork patterns to trick up the archways, accentuating the arch, and then using some stonework of different sizes for a bit of visual interest. To get an in-depth guide on my stonework carving process, check out literally any of the other Gondor videos, but basically carve, widen the grout lines with a pencil, depress the odd brick to create some relief, and then texture the whole thing with aluminium foil. I then made a whole bunch of extra flat stone fascias, which would serve as a foundation for the city above that carries all the way down into the canal and creating a culvert wall, including some additional stairs to match the stairwell in the old layout that used to connect the two boards together. Now, it's going to head down to a dock. Next, I carved away some long strips of foam on an angle to give the upper plate of the bridge a chamfer down to the supports below, and then glued it down to the main structure. And then we're going to complete the back wall of the canal using rock cliffs from the natural landscape, but first we need a surface to glue those rocks onto. So I extended that wall surface with a thin but strong sheet of foam board, as well as blocking out the end of the canal with some expanded polystyrene foam blocks. The top of the bridge then needed some finishing touches, starting with a thin layer of modelling compound, flattened out and then rolled with my flagstone texture roller to match the Minas Tirith road. Once that was dry, I trimmed away the edges and made some recessed battlements, and then filled in all of the trim joins with grout and sealed it with isopropyl alcohol and matte scenic sealant to lock it down really tight. Before we build in any cliff work, I gave all of the foam elements a big prime, first in a foam-safe floral primer and then Rust-Oleum white to match Minas Tirith, and then I started tacking on the rock molds with PVA glue and hot glue for both a quick and fast grab and a long and strong bond. Then, as always, to turn our higgledy-piggledy rock molds into a seamless rock face, I blended the joins with modelling compound. I worked my way around the culvert, adding more panels of foam board and more rock molds until I had a fully scenic culvert, ensuring that I was completely sealing the canal with compound, because of course this will eventually be filled with resin. But first, this video is brought to you by Manscaped.com, the global brand for men's grooming and hygiene products. Manscaped offers the best tools and liquid formulations for the three big odor zones: your body, your butt, and your balls. They recently hooked me up with a bunch of stuff from their all-in-one performance package 4.0. Let's check it out. Up first, we've got the Lawnmower 4.0 body trimmer, Manscaped's 4th generation electric and waterproof trimmer with advanced skin-safe technology to help reduce cuts and nicks on all those sensitive regions of the body. Also included in the Performance Package 4.0 kit is the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant, the Crop Reviver Ball Toner Spray, and the Weed Whacker Ear and Hair Nose Trimmer. Manscaped really does have you covered from head to toe. For a limited time, you get all this plus 2 free gifts: the Shed Travel Bag and the Manscaped Anti-Chaving Boxer Briefs. Go to manscaped.com today to get 20% off, free international shipping, and those 2 free gifts when you use the promo code ZORP at checkout. Manscaped, always the right tools for the job. Then it was time for my absolute favorite technique for realistic rock work, Leopard Spotting. This is where we dilute some inks of various colors and splotch them straight onto the unprimed plaster, starting with browns, greens, and yellows, and then go all over that mottled pattern with a dark black wash. The natural absorbency of plaster bleeds the colors together and creates a lovely mix of hues that looks super realistic. Some of you roasted the Moria rock wall I did in my last video because the green was a bit too strong, but that footage was actually filmed when the paint was still wet and the colors hadn't fully muted. Here you can see that once the plaster has fully dried and the tones have blended together, it looks really fantastic. To finish it off, I then bring in a big dry brush and vigorously dry brush the surface of the rock molds to rub paint off the highest points, and that gives it a really nice chalky quartzy highlight, like little veins of quartz running through the surface of the rock wall. The final job for the culvert is the riverbed. I smashed down a big layer of fast drying basing glue, waited for that to get tacky, about 15 minutes I'll usually do it till the edges start to go clear and glossy, and then sprinkled a whole bunch of Scrubland Base Ready from Geek Gaming, and then blended that in with some Green Blend foam flock to create a nice mossy stony riverbed. I sealed that all down tight with some isopropyl alcohol and matte scenic sealant spray, and then she's going to be ready for resin. All of those sexy scenic materials and every scenic product used in this video can be purchased from my shop, Zorpazorp.com, if you want to score some amazing quality scenics and support the channel at the same time. It's time to make a sacrifice to the dark gods, so like the video, subscribe, and comment down below your favorite Space Marine vehicle to give yourself a chance to win an epic reinforcement bundle for your Heresy forces, including the new Deimos Rhino, the Kratos battle tank, and a full set of heavy and special weapons. It's the perfect follow-up if you just grabbed the Age of Darkness box set. Remember, if you are gearing up for Horus Heresy, use my affiliate links down in the description to grab the best prices in the UK, Australia, the EU, the US, and Canada, and you'll get some incredible discounts and send some dollary-doos back to support the channel and power on the march to terror. Then it was time to lay out all the pieces of the board and make these 4 different pieces work together into one cohesive gaming landscape. First up, I needed to trim down the curved wall coming from the gatehouse, as well as some of the blacksmith stairs to get those to join flush. Then of course we needed some way to get down from the upper city to the gatehouse, so I repurposed an old bridge element from the original Osgiliath board and hacked it apart until it was the right height, pulled off the battlements and gave it a big stone texture with modeling compound and textured roller just like the bridge earlier, let that dry enough until I could trim it down and remount those battlements I pulled off, as well as adding some foam edging to the top and bottom to keep the compound protected, and then blended all those parts together with some grout and scenic sealant. Before mounting the bridge in place, I extended the flagstone texture of the inner courtyard, and then with that bridge in, these pieces are seamlessly joined as one big castle working its way up the slope of the rock. The front still needed some work though, with a bit of grass texture down above the culvert, and then I threw together a little trench to help alleviate the height discrepancy in front of the wall using some more Osgiliath Bridge leftovers and some modelling compound. But I didn't have time to properly test all of these elements out because it was filming time, so I threw them all into the truck along with a whole bunch of other scenery for the campaign and drove it round to the studio I hired for the shoot and dumped it all into the loading area. Once the studio filming section itself was ready, it was time to start setting up the board properly. Now lots of these boards are different heights, so I had to prop up parts with sheets of foam of different thicknesses, and then I could start perfecting the layout. I jammed in my little trench we just made, which perfectly filled that hole in front of the front curved wall, and then used part of Eric's amazing crafting guild out the front of the gatehouse as a little defensive forward bastion. To fix the weird end walkway by only using half of Eric's building, I made a little buttress to cap that off and mounted that in place, and then one of Dave's little buildings finished off the front courtyard, and then for the inner courtyard I made a little wall fascia to cover that exposed green foam between the ramp that we made and the curved wall, and then mounted Raquel's Emporium, Eric's tower, and Dave's second small building in the upper city. To block out the empty space on the very top tier, I used some epic MDF buildings from Knights of Dice, which started to get a bit more modern and sleek, and then ended up using another one on the top of the Broadsword Blacksmith, and then started spreading a smattering of Modernisation elements throughout the structure. Computer consoles, pipes and exhausts, vents. Basically, we want to bring a little bit of that modern futuristic Horus Heresy aesthetic into the build, but this structure, Leptius Numinous, is actually an old historical structure that has been preserved for its dignity and its regal facade, and kept in working order as the Governor's Palace on Calth. So we don't mind at all that it feels very much still like a medieval castle. That's essentially the whole focal point of the big siege here in the first episode of our Mark and Calth campaign. There's a lovely juxtaposition of the modern warfare taking place in such a classic battleground. We've got castle battlements that are manned by fucking space marines. And with those final touches done, we have an absolutely epic battleground. And how utterly mental does it look, covered with 25,000 points of Horus Heresy. I'm so damn happy with how this transformation took place. I managed to convert Minas Tirith, a symbol of the Lord of the Rings, into the perfect Leptius Numinous straight out of the Horus Heresy novel Know No Fear by Dan Abnett, including all of the key features that we hear in the book, the culvert, the bridge, the gatehouse. I've even got an explodable wall section so the Baneblade can drive into the inner courtyard just like we hear in the story. Please, please, please jump on over to the Cinematic Battle Report where this board gets used. Even if you don't normally like watching gameplay style videos, I promise you this is going to blow you away. Nothing like this campaign has ever been seen on YouTube, and I'm so damn proud of it. Along with Ollie from Broadsword Wargaming, I've been planning the Mark of Calth campaign for nearly 2 years, and it is a huge landmark moment for Zorpazorp and for me as a creator. I really hope you guys love it. Links are pinned in the top comment and the description. Thank you so much for your support. If you really love the campaign, get on over to Patreon, link down below, like these amazing people. Huge shout out to you guys, you really keep my going, and I will see you all in the next one. Lachie out.
Officer of Record, start the mark.